Project Zomboid is one of the more difficult survival games out there, so today I thought, why not challenge myself a little by attempting to survive 100 days without killing a single zombie, or using a simple create fence exploit to stop zombies from pathing to me. I threw on some QOL mods along with Pillow's random spawns to really spice things up. In terms of sandbox settings, I set helicopter events to sometimes and darkness during night to bright so that you guys can see what happens if I decide to retire from Reddit and walk outside. For traits, I went with thin skin, high thirst, slow healer, claustrophobic, conspicuous, pacifist for obvious reasons, prone to illness, smoker, weak stomach, slow reader, speed demon, cat's eyes, dexterous, outdoorsman, runner, fast learner, organized, stout, and athletic.
Alright, I get it!
As you can tell, the build is entirely focused on fitness and agility. If I can't kill any zombies, I want to have the luxury to at least outmaneuver them. You guys know how I've always wanted to work with a certain mobile game. I think I've literally talked about it in like every stream for over a year now. Well, imagine this. What if, I don't know, said legend came lurking from the shadows? Almost a, raid, if you will? That little guy was so excited to talk about Raid that we decided to throw him a party for Raid's 4th anniversary. To surprise our little guy, we even invited 4 of his favorite champions. First on the list is the Underpriest Brogni, a legendary dwarf who we badgered into making a celebrity guest appearance. Next on the list, we have the Royal Guard, serving as our security for the night since they can literally paralyze enemies while dealing insane amounts of damage. For our third guest, we invited Herndig to be the life of the party. This is due to the fact that his passive lets him boost his turn meter every time he takes a hit, so we can keep the party going all night long. And finally, we have Jintoro, because we needed someone to cut the cake, and who better to do that than a literal samurai. Raid Shadow Legends is constantly expanding, with its newest features introducing a live PvP arena letting you battle against other players. This is actually my favorite feature in the game and comes with a ton of rewards. I'm talking new artifact sets, fragments for a legendary Void champion, and special live arena crests that unlock powerful new bonuses in the Great Hall. With all of this exciting stuff and more coming to Raid, if you haven't started playing yet, then what are you waiting for? Use the link in my description or scan my QR code to get some insane bonuses like an epic champion, some energy refills, magic potions, and XP brews which will help get you an edge in the competition when you're first getting started. Once you're in and completely invested like me and all the other cool kids, go ahead and look me up. My in-game name is
Prades.
From there, you can come raid with me.
He said it!
Remember to hit my link in the description, and I'll see you out there. Meet Seymour Heinies, an edgy My Chemical Romance enthusiast who lives at home with his parents who just don't understand him even though he's 34 and still has all-time low posters hanging up in his room. It looks like I spawned in a warehouse, which makes sense, right? Just spawn me in a perfect weapon spawn location and not allow me to use any of them. I grabbed some basic necessities like a hammer, a wrench, some cabbage seeds, and all that before stumbling onto a machete. Checking the map, it looks like we spawned in Louisville. We're next to the water and on the far northeast side of the map. Great. This isn't all that bad though. There's a construction site just out of town that I can base up at with surrounding fences, which should make for an interesting time. The big issue is just getting through Louisville unscathed. Walking outside, I found a van in pretty good condition along with 2 zombies wandering towards me. After looping them around a nearby car for a few minutes, I realized how stupid I was for not just locking them in the warehouse with their other blue-collar constituents. From there, I was able to hotwire the car and hit the road. Not bad for day 1. The hardest part of my day came at the military checkpoint when I had to move the barricades to pass through. The best method I could come up with was to pull all the zombies into a giant ball, kite them into the grass, then sprint back to move 1 barricade. Moving past the checkpoint, I sort of zoned out and didn't realize I'd already passed the construction site. Not willing to risk heading back at this point, I set off for a smaller summer camp on the outskirts of Louisville, arriving there around sunset. Because I went with claustrophobic, I'll only be able to sleep in large open rooms until I can find some beta blockers, so I chose the front entry lounge as the best possible spot for me to sleep. I can hear some zombies around somewhere, but they sounded like they were behind a door, so I didn't really think too much of it and went to sleep on the couch. Waking up early the next morning, I began looting the camp. There's a TV on the 2nd floor that I can use for life and living. After looting the upstairs area, I found my way into the medical room where I discovered some cabinets housing my nurse cosplay outfit. Aside from that, I spent the morning going door to door and pulling each zombie out individually before luring them into the woods like someone on to catch a predator. Before circling back to safety, of course. Moving on to the other buildings in the area, I found a school bag on the floor which I desperately needed. In the cabinets, I found an alarm clock, so at least now we know what time it is. In the shared cabins, I found some cultist zombies along with military clothing. The last place to loot was the cafeteria. Inside, I found all the cabinets were full of books, pens, and pencils. No wonder everyone died here. This should be a great location to grind out some carpentry XP though, as long as I'm able to pull the zombies out of the area beforehand. This isn't my forever home by any means, but it's definitely a good place to level some skills early on. There's a bookstore and a market just north of here that should set me up pretty nicely for a week or so. The only issue? It's right next to the Valley Station Mall. Since I've been rocking stealth so far, normally I wouldn't think much of this, but because I picked conspicuous, stealth in urban environments is effectively useless. I wanted to take my car, but decided against it for now since I could lose the zombies easier walking back into the woods, and it just didn't make that much sense to me to try to maneuver the streets of Louisville right now. While walking, I found a body, and got incredibly lucky by finding a digital watch on its corpse. I was able to snag it off of her before the nearby zombies could grab me, and with that, we have the date and can effectively ditch the alarm clock. Though, I think I'll hang on to it for now since it could come in handy if I need to move zombies later. Luring the zombies around wasn't too difficult since I could just spam shout to group them together, then walk the largest pile into the forest nearby. With only a few dozen left around, I was able to successfully enter the bookstore. There were a few zombies inside to worry about, so I pulled them out and made one large loop around the building, re-entering and looting again before having to bail. I walked away with Carpentry 1, 2, and 5, Electrician 5, Farming 2, First Aid 2, 3, and 4, Metalworking 1, and Trapping 1, 2, and 3, along with a fishing magazine that I can make fishing nets with. It's not perfect, but it's a good start. Another thing I'm doing since I can't kill zombies and loot their clothes is I'm taking all the clothes off the pre-spawned corpses on the ground. I crimp them up into sheets and use those sheets for thread to boost my protection later on. Now that I have some knowledge, it's time to focus on food. There's a fossil not too far away from me, right on the outskirts of West Point. I need fuel anyway, so I figured why not kill two birds with one stone and hit it up. The drive up wasn't bad at all, and even moving the initial horde away from the gas station wasn't too bad either. The issue for me came with the remaining 2 to 4 zombies lingering around. I got scratched while trying to push the zombie off because I didn't realize I was holding gas cans in both hands, but outside of that I was able to fuel up the van and 2 gas cans before heading inside the gas station to loot it. From a food perspective, it wasn't great. I got some bags of chips and some soda, but in terms of cigarettes, I should be set for almost the entire playthrough. The last spot I wanted to hit up over here was the self-storage nearby. The reason being, each unit counts as an individual garage spawn, which means these self-storage POIs have the largest chance for generators to spawn in them. I woke up the next morning to see it raining outside. I have 2 packs of cabbage seeds, so I figured now would be a great time to plant them. It gives me a few days to find a generator mag, keep the freezers powered up after power finally goes out here. By the time I dug furrows and planted the cabbage seeds, it was already noon, so I decided to spend the rest of the day sawing logs and disassembling furniture to hit carpentry level 2. Day 6 is where I got risky. I need a generator magazine to survive long term, but there's nowhere near me that I can search for that won't end up with me being killed at least. With limited options, I turned to the West Point School since it has a fairly large library in it. If I can't find it there, I was just going to start going door to door through the nearby houses to see if I could get a lucky spawn. I chose to drive to the fossil I traveled to on day 4 and park there, heading into West Point on foot. Because I'm a dumb I got distracted while on FaceTime and forgot to record the first half of the day. Luckily I noticed this when I got to the school and started recording before looting the library so that you get to watch me find a generator mag on one of the bookshelves. Because you didn't get to experience the streets of West Point with me earlier, I figured it's only worth it that you get to watch me walk back to the van so I can showcase how easy West Point is with normal spawns. All in all, I left the school with a generator mag along with magazines for hunting, cooking, farming, metalworking, and carpentry books 3 and 4. Now that I'm effectively set up for long-term survival, the next step is to start grinding skills, so I spent all of day 7 just reading my skill books. I got lucky and caught 2 Life and Living episodes which leveled me up to Carpentry 3 and Foraging 1. This continued into day 8 as well. Since I have a slow reader, these books take forever, even when I'm just starting volume 1. At this point, I'm confident that I can survive 100 days here easily. I have a generator, fuel, crops, security, and enough forested area to loop tens of thousands of zombies around here, but that'd be boring. Because of this, I loaded up the car with most of the gear I had here, and made plans to set off to build my own base. It'll take some time, and I'm not ready to leave here just yet, especially with my cabbages growing, but setting up a small camp near my new base location will help set everything in motion. This may look like a wonky location now, and it probably is, but I promise this will be worth it whenever I get around to building. The next morning, I watered my cabbages and spent the entire day grinding out carpentry by disassembling everything I could get my hands on. Around 1:30 in the afternoon, I got my first heli event. If you don't know, you can actually hide from these pretty easily just by sitting indoors. It'll attract any nearby zombies towards your location, but they won't have any pathfinding on you until you step outside or near a window, so you can effectively dodge the entire event by just trapping yourself in the closet like Tom Cruise or R. Kelly. On day 11, I leveled up my carpentry to level 4, and spent the rest of the day reading Carpentry Volume 3. In order to get started on my new base, I'll need some fire or wooden axes. Luckily for me, there is a massive city just north of my current location that has fire stations and warehouses, of which I set out for on the morning of day 12. I made it to the larger warehouse that evening before spending some time kiting the nearby zombies around the other side of the fencing and hopping back over. I didn't find any wooden axes, but I did walk away with 2 hand axes, along with a ton of seeds and nails to use. Since it was already so late, I ran up to the rooftop and slept on a plastic chair, waking up the next morning to find a zombie just staring at me straight out of a scene from Paranormal Activity. Because I injured my leg after getting jump scared in the morning, I decided to head back to the campground until it healed up. I was working my way through a trailer park when I found a truck belonging to a fire station with an axe inside, giving us a solid option to use for log gathering, though we'll need several more. My goal is simply to get back, heal up, and then use my van to drive out to the fire station in Rosewood to grab any other easy fire axe spawns. I made it back to base late that evening. On day 14, I set off on my quest to hit up some of the other cities on the map in search of axes. My first stop was at the West Point hardware store. There's an unmarked one on Main Street in between a post office and food market that I stopped at first. Found a sledgehammer and an axe in the first hardware store, which was a huge win for me. When I went to leave though, I opened the door to about 24 Jehovah's Witnesses, so I had to flee to the second store, where I found some snacks, but nothing of any real value. Back on the road, I made my way to the 4-way intersection with the gas station and clothing store, and stopped here to fuel up. I'm getting much more confident in my ability to kite zombies away from areas. While looting the gas station, I found a ton of water, chips, and cigarettes, along with another generator mag. In the parking lot, I found another van with keys in the glove box that I was able to start up. This one is in much better condition than my current vehicle, so I moved all my loot over, fueled this one up, and continued on my way. At one point, I just gave up and decided to sleep on the side of the road, before continuing the following morning. My first target was the McCoy logging. Not only is it full of crafting materials that we need, but there's also a chance for wood axes to spawn in the crates. Just down the road from McCoy, I found a truck parked with some cones laid out. On the floor next to the car was a sledgehammer, so I kited 3 zombies into the field before looping around for the sledge. There were a decent amount of zombies loitering around the warehouses, so I grouped them up and led them into the forest to the west before looping back around. After looting the 2 warehouses, I had only managed to find 1 axe, which was less than stellar. Heading to Rosewood, the roads were completely covered in zombies. To stop myself from hitting any, I moved slowly and would back up to create a louder noise radius, pulling zombies in one direction before moving the opposite. This was super effective in clearing the roads ahead of me, but would make the return journey near impossible. I made it to the Rosewood fire station just before 1 PM, and tried to hit the garage fast before too many zombies could group up on me. The fire station was much more lucrative, giving me 7 fire axes, though 2 of them were effectively broken. Regardless, it was a massive haul. Now I think we all know this wouldn't be a Preds video if I didn't Paul Walker a light pole. The drive back was pretty easy. I headed north more towards the center of the map before turning east, essentially bypassing all of Muldra. I decided to stop at a farmhouse for the night since I didn't want to have to drive back to base in the middle of the night with all the zombies on the roads. On day 16, I made my way back to the four-way intersection where I swapped vans. After cutting some zombies into the woods, I pinned one under me while I refilled my car, and the gas cans that I looted on my journey. Further down the road, I found a lug wrench and a car jack that I looted from a wreck in the middle of the road. After dropping off my gear at the build site, I headed back to the campground to check on my cabbages. They were ready for harvest, but I wanted to wait until they were seed bearing so that I could get a decent return. At this point, I'm just waiting on the cabbages before fully transitioning to the build site, so I spent my time grinding out the next sprinting level before burning through any skill books that I had access to. The power went out on day 17 while I was reading. Other than that, nothing really happened. I just continued enjoying my book club of one.
It's my book club, Peter. Come join us.
Oh, okay.
Still waiting on my cabbages, I decided to spend the day foraging, at least until I hit level 2. After sitting around for 3 days waiting for something amazing to happen, I walked outside on day 19 to see my cabbages were finally ready, giving me 82 cabbages and 246 seeds. With everything taken care of, it's time to move over to the build site, where I'll be spending a considerable amount of time over the next 2 months. After organizing my gear into set piles, I realized I need sheet rope. Well, I don't need it, but it'll help substantially, so I set off for West Point to loot some of the houses. Using 3 pieces of clothing and a sheet, I made 4 rope, which I realized would not be nearly enough for what I was hoping for. So after spending the night in my car, I set back out for West Point. The big challenge of a pacifist run is the ability to kite zombies out of the areas that you want to enter, or at least minimize the amount in the vicinity. This is something I consider myself fairly proficient in doing, but it can also make the game a little boring since sometimes all I wanted to do was just take out a crowbar and queue up a massive zombie killing montage. Since I can't do that, I tried to keep things interesting. Back at the build site, I had accumulated 13 sheet rope, which would be more than enough to get the job done. With everything taken care of, I turned my attention to committing mass deforestation, using all the axes I'd accumulated so far. I spent all of day 21 continuing my quest to slay the Lorax and everything he held dear to him, and by that, I mean I chopped down more trees. On day 22, I woke up to it raining and figured now would be a great time to plant some more cabbages since my supply had just gone stale. After that, I turned my attention back to chopping down trees again. While continuing the process on day 23, I got hit with my second heli event, which was a little unnerving since I just spent all morning slamming an axe into wood and was not only exhausted, but ridiculously tired as well. To compensate, I hopped in my car and started driving around until the heli event left, hopefully pulling any zombies near the build site with me. Making my way back was much more difficult than I thought it was going to be. With all the zombies in the middle of the road, I just spammed my horn to try and group them up before trying to outmaneuver my way through them. After making it back to the build site, I noticed one zombie off in the distance, so I just hoped they didn't make their way over to me, moved into the passenger seat, and went to sleep. The zombie was still there the next morning, so I did a small walk through the area, trying to pull any stragglers out before ditching them across the river by West Point. After that, it was back to chopping down more trees. This continued for several days until I felt I had enough logs to accomplish my building plans. Well, that, and to be honest, I was just getting tired of doing the same thing over and over all day. On day 28, I got to work sawing all the logs. Seems easy enough, right? Well, yeah, it may be easy, but it's also incredibly time-consuming. After spending 2 full days doing nothing but sawing planks, I finally finished up with a total of something like 3,000 planks, give or take a few hundred. The big issue now is that I have no food left. Well, I have a few units of canned food, but nothing substantial. On top of that, my potatoes are going to take at least a few more days before they're ready to harvest, so for now, we'll have to put this on pause and spend a day or two restocking our supplies. On the morning of day 30, I set off for the Giga Mart in West Point. This was the closest grocery store to me and gave me the fastest method of gathering any non-perishables that I'll need. I only got to do one looting run in the morning because while I was pulling zombies out the back room, I accidentally held shift near a window and jumped through, giving me a deep wound in my right hand. I chose to skip out on Gwyneth Paltrow's candle shop and head back to the build site to stitch myself up. That being said, I still managed to loot a few weeks worth of food. Couple that with my potatoes and we're gonna be just fine. Starting on day 31, I began the process of building my base. Starting with the platform, I built out a 4x4 lane so that I can drive cars down it without issue. I might expand it to 5 tiles down the line, but for now, 4 should be more than enough. I finished up the platform portion on day 34. I ended up choosing to add a 5th tile all the way out just so that I didn't run the risk of totaling my car because I drifted slightly in any direction. I basically just built straight out until I leveled up carpentry to level 6 and began working on moving all the planks out to the edge. I spent the rest of day 34 and most of day 35 reading Carpentry Volume 4. On day 36, I woke up to find that I had drank my last soda and was completely out of water. Because of this, I felt compelled to head back to West Point, going door to door to find water coolers. After wandering around for a while, I did stumble into a bathroom where I was able to fill up 17 water bottles and bring them back to the build site. The next morning, I started on the walkway up to the base. I went with a larger open rectangle so that I could park cars and turn around here. From there, I built a pyramid-style path up to where the main section of the base will be. I spent most of day 38 working on that pyramid section, but it turned out pretty ugly since we're in the isometric camera angle, so I filled the rest of it on day 39 and built a small pathway leading to the entrance of what would be the base. I also got hit with my second heli event, which brings me to a key point of this base. We're too far into the middle of nowhere for any zombies to be pulled in from the heli event, making us completely safe whenever it happens. After building out the airlock, I expanded the open area once again so that I could stack cars here without risking it becoming too cluttered. Day 40 saw me building out the actual foundation of the base itself. I had the walkway done, the garage was all but decorated, now I just need to build the actual building. I took a break from construction on day 45 to harvest my potatoes and read Farming Volume 2. I ended up with 63 potatoes and 192 more potato seeds. With those, I wanted to wait until my cabbages hit their next growth stage so that I could essentially have an endless supply of crops to harvest. Oh, also, my weight is now down to 69.
Nice. Nice.
So we'll have to address that at some point. It's not the biggest concern, since that 20% melee damage reduction doesn't impact us, but the endurance loss and chance to fall definitely does. The next day, I hit carpentry level 8 while working on the garage, so I spent the rest of day 46 and all of day 47 reading Carpentry Volume 5 to finish off that skill. While building out the roof on one of the bedrooms, I became Jesus when I jumped off the platform and began walking on water. Checkmate, atheists. At this point, I needed a day off of building, and it came at the perfect time since I just ran out of water, sending me back into West Point once again. I wanted to stop by the Gigamart as well to see if there were any butter or margarine in the fridges that I could use to cure my anorexia. I came away from the grocery store with 3 margarine and 3 lard, along with a sack of rotten cabbages. Now the cabbages don't really matter to me, but having an empty sack will help us move dirt into the base to use as a garden. After leaving the grocery store, I headed into the suburbs to refill my water bottles. Bathtubs seem to work best, just because they hold the most water in them. Alright, now that our immediate needs are taken care of, back to building. While building out the master bedroom on day 54, I got hit with another heli event. I waved hello to the Kobe Bryant killer and got back to work since we're too far off land for the helicopter to pull any zombies over at this point. Unfortunately, I ran out of planks that evening, meaning it was back to chopping trees once again. At this point, I realized the video has essentially divulged into a base building project, but there's only so much kiting I can do in one video before it becomes overly stale. So I decided to put a focus on building something wacky and then furnishing it with items I can dismantle or steal from the surrounding cities. This way I can keep it fun for me and still show off some pretty intense zombie kiting with actual purpose instead of just walking into the city for the sake of content. I also came up with a new method for logs. Instead of sawing all of them and driving the planks to the base, I was just loading up the van with log stacks, then delivering those to the garage section. It looks like zombies are finally starting to wander into the initial build site. I needed to move them before I could continue, so I spent the morning grouping up all the zombies in the area before leading them over the bridge and looping back around through the train tracks. I chose the bridge here because there's 2 barriers for the zombies to need to hop over. There's also a chance to experience pathing issues with all the wrecked cars on the bridge, making it easier to lose them here. Once I made it back, I got to work moving my logs again. This wasn't until another group came wandering over. I pulled those zombies further to the east before circling back and harvesting my cabbages, stopping to read Farming Volume 3 when I hit level 4. Day 57 saw me kiting a single zombie around so that I could effectively spend the entire afternoon sawing planks. I'm not sure if this will be enough, honestly. I'd still have to do all the walls, the roofing, and then add rain collectors and doors, but I guess we'll just have to see. The only issue I've run into so far is that some of the walls can only be built from the outside, forcing me to platform out to them in order to add a wall. It's not the end of the world by any means, just not something I was anticipating. On day 60, I maxed my carpentry skill, in the process of using the last of my planks. This was basically a repeat of the last tree chopping escapade. I was only able to gather about 1 trip's worth of logs before the zombies came wandering over, forcing me back to the base for the night. The frustrating aspect of this challenge came down to dealing with small groups of zombies. Every time I thought it was clear to work, 2 to 4 zombies would walk over and I'd end up spending hours kiting them around in order to do something simple like make log stacks. They didn't pose much of a threat, but they are annoying to deal with when you can't just smack them until confetti pops out. Eventually, I was able to come up with another 240 planks, which should at least be enough to wall in the rooms at the base, which is conveniently what I spent all of days 62 and 63 doing. It's worth noting as well, I really don't need anything for rain collectors, since I can just drink from the river. For those that don't know, even with a weak stomach, you can drink from the river as long as you don't spam it. You'll only get nauseous, which will go away after a few hours, giving you an endless supply of water. On the morning of day 64, I found a single zombie roaming the ground floor of my base. It must have followed me back here last night. Luckily it was just one, so I spent the early morning pulling it all the way back to land before circling back to my rooftop by sunrise. I also finally built out a campfire to allow me to boil water and make stews, soups, and other foods via cooking. After filling up on some more water bottles, I set out to acquire doorknobs and hinges, as well as any furniture I could fit in the van. West Point has become stale at this point, so I set my sights on a neighborhood just outside of Louisville. Of course, the first house I enter sets off an alarm, pulling in hundreds of nearby zombies. Trying to hide from said zombies, I moved up to a car, and when I went to open the trunk, at this point, I decided to focus on hinges and doorknobs and leave the furniture for another run, since I'd already pulled any zombie in a 50-mile radius. I was able to make it back to base that evening, though not without visitors. At this point, I was just hoping the van would be enough to stop them from entering. After spending the morning of day 65 leading more zombies over the bridge, I circled back around for yet another round of tree chopping and log gathering.
I am the Lord, as I speak for the trees, and the trees tell you yourself.
On day 66, I set out to find another vehicle. If you're wondering why I need a new one when I have a van, I spent the day in West Point since that was the closest city to me and gave me the best chance to find more vehicles. I was actually able to get into a couple and even hotwire them, but didn't have enough time to fuel them up and get out due to the amount of zombies around. By early afternoon, I had wandered over to the school and began working my way back down on the northern end of the city, until eventually, I found a beautiful Corvette just sitting in a driveway. The key was already in it, and it just needed fuel. I was able to successfully bait zombies behind a house before looping back around, fueling up the car, and getting it back to base. The car itself isn't necessarily great for what I need it for, but it's better than nothing. Day 67 saw me building out a gate and adding the first door of the airlock before running out of doorknobs. I picked a small cul-de-sac on the southern end of West Point near a church and got to work. Pull a large group of zombies into the trees to meet the Viet Cong before looping back around to get started. Now the big brain strat here was to bait zombies into hitting the doors to break them passively so that I didn't need to make myself vulnerable by breaking them myself. Using this method, I was able to loot 7 hinges and 5 doorknobs along with a comfy blue chair. Now that I have some materials, I got back to work on the base, building out the 3 remaining doors. After that, I got to work in the last wall section of the base, before running out of planks and getting hit with yet another heli event. Later on in the day, while I was shaving, I noticed a zombie had broken through half of the gate of the garage entrance, resulting in me leading it all the way back to land, pulling in about a dozen additional zombies and guiding them into the trees. Day 69 saw me building out the garden above the garage. Since I only have one sack, and each sack can only hold 4 tiles of dirt, this took a ton of time to run back and forth placing 4 tiles, then running all the way back down the path to refill. This continued into day 70, when I got taken from behind. Luckily, it was just a laceration to the head and not a bite. The next morning, I got to work picking up all of the leftover logs from the original build site. I got overconfident again while sawing logs and took a shot to the neck, once again getting extremely lucky that it wasn't a bite. After baiting the zombie around, I moved the Corvette in front of the damaged gate and got to work using the rest of the planks on the base. Well, that was the plan anyway. What ended up happening was I had to pull a crawler all the way back to land, like I was holding it while my friend spun the mystery box for a ray gun. That evening, I realized that I was completely out of food, so we'll need to fix that tomorrow. Since it was raining and I'm lazy, I took the morning to plant my crops in the base garden, even though I'm currently starving to death. After planting some cabbages and potatoes, I hopped in the vet and headed off to the mechanic shop just outside of West Point. Should be relatively easy to get access to, and has a small break room that has some food as well as a water cooler that I can take advantage of. Oh, and I also took a souvenir with me for the road. Days 73 and 74 saw me finishing up the build portion of the base. Well, at least all that I was willing to put effort into. So it's really just the final walling of the bedroom along with the finishing up the rooftop. At this point, I was out of food again, and still have a few more days to go on my potatoes. Given the excuse to leave the area again, I set off for a town next to a particularly phallic-shaped pond. I know it's a little out of the way, but there's not as many zombies there. It's got a gas station and a farming and hardware store that I can take advantage of. Can also grab some furniture while I'm there and maybe even find a vehicle with a larger trunk. I arrived at the gas station at around noon and got to work moving zombies out of the area. The big issue with this area that I didn't think about is that there's no trees anywhere to lose the zombies in, so they can see you from an incredible distance, meaning I have to pull them way out of town, circle back, and then hope for the best. What ended up happening was every time I grabbed a few dozen, another group would wander over before I got back, because zombie migration in this game has been completely broken for like 5 months now, and zombies can't stand to see an empty tile on the map. After repeating this process for about 6 hours, I gave up on gas and headed over to the shops to see if I could find anything useful. I ended up finding some seeds and a few watering cans at the farmer's shop. Before making a loop through the neighborhood to try to find another vehicle. With this trip an abject failure, I gave up and decided to head back nearly empty-handed. After getting back early in the morning of day 76, I slept in and spent the rest of the day moving all my gear from the initial build site into the actual base. Once I had a giant pile, I began the process of organizing everything. On day 77, I headed back to West Point to finally start furnishing the base. This took the entire morning since I had to maneuver my car through all the zombies, then pull them together and kite them away from the furniture store before looting a simple desk. After throwing that into the trunk, I repeated the process to get back in and grab a coffee table along with a blue couch to match the blue chair in the bedroom. Getting back to base that afternoon, I turned the bedroom into a mini office before heading out to chop some trees in order to build out a loot and storage area. Day 78 saw me building out a library in one of the bottom rooms, along with a general storage area on the second floor. I began building out a bar in the lobby, but ran out of planks once again. Once I was out of planks, I spent the rest of the day decorating with the furniture I had placed so far, as well as moved my giant pile of loot into the tower of crates that was my storage area. The next morning, I harvested some of my potatoes. I only grabbed 5 of the crop tiles here so that I can stagger how many I have on me at a time, effectively giving me more sustainability so that they don't all go stale before I can eat them. This should give the crops in the garage more time to grow as well. To keep stock of all of this, I set out to find another ice freezer. They can typically be found in gas stations, so I took the risk and set off for the 4-way intersection that I swapped vans at all that time ago. I traveled on foot so that I could potentially grab another car there and bring it back with me. I managed to reach the intersection by early afternoon and found a freezer inside the gas station. From there, I worked my way to the used car lot where I found a truck to throw the freezer into. After kiting a smaller group of zombies around, I was able to hotwire the truck and begin my journey back. We're at day 80, and I'm running out of things to do at this point. With nothing left to lose, I set off for the Enigma books in West Point to try to grab anything I was missing. I didn't really have a focus for any specific books, instead opting to just loot everything. Call it boredom or just sheer stupidity, but this did lead to at least one adrenaline rush at around 2 p.m. Getting back to base that afternoon, I heard another helicopter flying in to keep tabs on me. Wasn't overly concerned with it though, so I spent the rest of the day stocking out my library. With what time I had left, I shotgunned potatoes into my mouth to try to mitigate my weight loss, which didn't help all that much and just left me without any food. I had plans to head out to gather some artwork for the base, but it was raining and I didn't want to travel in a thunderstorm. Because of this, I spent the day hanging out in the office, catching up on some skill books. The storm was somehow even worse the next day, so I just repeated the same process, and then ended up drinking all of my sodas to avoid starvation. When visiting the garage the next morning, I noticed that my cabbages were ready to harvest. This means there should only be another day or two of waiting before they're seed bearing, so I decided to just hang out around my base until then, wasting time trying to kite zombies around in the fog so I could harvest a few potatoes. When I wasn't doing that, I was focusing on some other skills like fishing. On day 85, my cabbages were finally ready for harvest. I managed to level up twice before finishing my harvest, giving me just under 200 cabbages and over 500 seeds. I replanted the cabbages I'd harvested, and after kiting a zombie back to shore, went back to finish harvesting the remaining vegetables. The next morning, I decided to pull the trigger on something I'd been waiting to do until I was certain I had a sustainable setup. On the morning of day 86, I hopped in my truck and started honking my horn to pull any nearby zombies over to me. Once I'd completely removed the zombies, I circled back and began towing the broken van down to the walkway, eventually wedging the truck and the van against the edges, before heading back to grab the Corvette, wedging that up against the truck, making it nearly impossible for any zombies to push through, but also effectively locking me in the base. With nothing but time on my hands, I spent the next 2 weeks trying to grind out as many skills as possible. Since I have shattered glass from crashing the van, I started with first aid. If you don't know, the best way to level first aid quickly is by walking over shattered glass like you're on off-brand John McClane. I found myself spending entire days reading volumes 4 and 5 of the first aid skill books because slow reader likes to cause me pain. I maxed out first aid on day 94 and turned focus to fishing. Progress was incredibly slow since I was spearfishing though. Like, seriously, watch this. I go a solid 8 hours or so before catching a single fish. This challenge was one of those that started off as a ton of fun, but after about a month, it kind of lost its spark. Once I was set for late game, the challenging portion of the playthrough really fell off since I didn't need to go back into the cities. All that being said, this is one of my favorite bases that I've ever made, and one I wish I could have spent more time on without it becoming the entirety of the video. Apparently my favorite weapon was a screwdriver too, which I thought was hilarious because I've never even used it. A very special thank you to my YouTube members and Patreon supporters who make it possible for me to do this full time. I appreciate you all. As always, thanks for stopping by.